Sophie had always believed in the fairy tale. She and James had been high school sweethearts, their love story the kind people wrote books about. They married young, built a life together, and raised 2 beautiful children. For 15 years, Sophie thought she knew everything about her husband. His quirks, his dreams, his secrets. But she was wrong. It started with a receipt. Sophie was cleaning out James's car, a task she'd done 100 times before, when she found it tucked under the passenger seat. It was for a diamond necklace, purchased just a week ago. Her heart skipped a beat. James hadn't given her a necklace. She checked the date again, hoping she'd misread it, but there it was, staring back at her in bold print. That night she confronted him. "James, what's this?" she asked, holding up the receipt. He glanced at it, his face unreadable. "Oh, that's for Mom. Her birthday's coming up, and I wanted to get her something special." Sophie nodded, but something didn't sit right. James's mother had never been one for extravagant gifts, and besides, her birthday wasn't for another 3 months. Sophie's intuition, always sharp, screamed that something was off. Over the next few weeks, Sophie began to notice other things. James was working late more often. His phone always face down on the table. He'd started dressing differently, paying more attention to his appearance. And then there were the phone calls, brief, hushed conversations that ended the moment she walked into the room. Sophie's heart ached with suspicion, but she didn't want to believe it. James was her rock, her partner, the man she'd built her life with. But the doubt gnawed at her, growing louder with each passing day. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She hired a private investigator, a decision that felt both necessary and devastating. The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Claire, promised discretion and results. 2 weeks later, Claire called Sophie with the news. "I think you need to see this," Claire said, her voice gentle but firm. They met at a coffee shop, and Claire handed Sophie a folder. Inside were photos. James at a park with a woman and a little girl. James entering a house in a nearby town. James laughing with the woman in a way Sophie hadn't seen him laugh in years. The final blow was a photo of the little girl, no more than 5 years old, with James's unmistakable smile. Sophie's world shattered. James had another family. Wife. Daughter. A life she knew nothing about. She confronted him that night, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "How could you, James? How could you do this to us?" James's face paled as he realized what she knew. "Sophie, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been lying to me for years. That you have a whole other family." He tried to speak, but Sophie cut him off. "I want you out. Now." James left, and Sophie was left alone with her pain. But as the days passed, she realized she couldn't just let this go. She needed answers. She needed to understand how James could have done this, not just to her but to the other woman who, according to the investigator, had no idea James was married. Sophie decided to meet her. She drove to the nearby town, her heart pounding as she approached the house from the photos. She knocked on the door, and a woman answered, young, beautiful, with the same little girl from the photos clinging to her leg. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her tone polite but wary. "I'm Sophie," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I'm James's wife." The woman's face went pale. "What?" Sophie explained everything, showing her the photos and the evidence. The woman, whose name was Emily, was devastated. She had no idea James was married. He had told her he was divorced, that Sophie was his ex-wife who lived out of state. Emily had trusted him, loved him, built a life with him, just like Sophie had. As the two women talked, they realized they had more in common than they thought. They had both been deceived, both been hurt by the same man. And in that moment they made a decision. They would confront James together. The meeting was tense, emotional and raw. James tried to explain, to justify, but there was no excuse for what he had done. Sophie and Emily stood together, united in their pain and their determination to hold him accountable. In the end, James lost everything. Sophie filed for divorce, and Emily cut ties with him completely. The two women, once strangers, found solace in each other's strength. They formed an unlikely friendship, bound by the lies they had uncovered and the truth they had fought for. Sophie learned that love wasn't always enough to keep a relationship together, but it was enough to help her heal. And as she walked away from the ruins of her marriage, she knew she would be okay. She had faced the lies, and in doing so, she had found herself again. The end.